Hello everybody. I do believe we're live now. Sorry, I'm just setting up getting a last couple of things set up, which is always slightly complicated whilst holding a cat. But we're nearly there. I just want to set up my little monitor so I can see if the video is working. Yes, looks like it is. So hopefully you can see me and you can hear me okay. Looks suspiciously like everything's working to me. What do you think? Are we working all right? It's been very demanding today. I'm not sure why. Must be a bit out of sorts. So welcome to session 3. Is this right? It is session 3, isn't it? Yes, third one. So got something very interesting for you today. We're going to start on that white chalk and charcoal layering technique that I used to do the iron drawing and some of the other drawings you would have seen. The big advantage with this is it allows us, it's almost like mixing, so it's like almost like paint, so it's a step between just drawing with charcoal and paint. So we basically have two values. We have our compressed charcoal and our white chalk, and both of them have binder in them, so they behave slightly differently. And all right, yeah. He's kind of sitting on the mic. I'm a little bit concerned. Hopefully you can hear me and you're not just hearing Studio Cat. Looks like actually I might be a little bit too loud. I'm going to bring the volume down a bit. I turned it up the other day and I think maybe it's a little bit, I don't want it to distort. So yeah, so it has binder in it, so it behaves a little bit differently from charcoal. It's not quite as dry and dusty as charcoal, and it also allows you to layer the two values together. So the first thing we're going to look at today is matching Munsell values from the Munsell scale as exactly as we can with charcoal and chalk using this layering technique. All right, little man, do you want down? Going down? No. And then we're going to start transferring those to the lemon. So we're going to be doing as far as we can. Okay, you do want down, don't you? Okay, little bit. Go on then. A Munsell value accurate drawing of the lemon using the same broad areas as we did before. So the shadow, reflected light, halftone, and over into the light. Now, I already know what all of these values are, so I'm going to switch over to the close-up camera now, which has a picture of the lemon as well. Great, oh, you can all hear me okay, that's good. Okay, looks like everything's working all right. So let's get started. So talking about the materials, so the ones that I'm going to be using today are primarily the Cretacolor white chalk, which was linked to in the materials list, and also the compressed charcoal. Okay, is this light enough? I wonder if maybe I should bring up the exposure of this camera a little bit, or bring the light closer. Maybe that will do it. I think perhaps it's a little dark. I'm going to bring up the exposure of that camera a bit. It's, funnily enough, it seems almost like it's a little more difficult to figure out what the exposure should be when it's drawing. I guess I'm just more used to setting up the cameras for paint, perhaps. Hopefully that should do it. I'm going to turn my screen around a bit as well so I can see what I'm doing better. Not too loud, that's good. It's not always the easiest thing to judge the levels of the volume, and also sometimes I start off talking quite loud and then I get quieter and quieter as I go. So both of these, this one, the charcoal, the chalk, sorry, fits really well in my 3.0, what is this again? I forget what it is, 5.3 millimeters, I think, clutch pencil. This one doesn't fit. I do also have, you can get Cretacolor dark chalk leads, which are almost exactly the same as the white one, and they will go in a clutch pencil. And they're good to use too. The compressed charcoal is slightly softer, but anything like that should be okay. You're also going to need sandpaper for sharpening. Inevitably, we're going to have to do a lot of sharpening as we go along, but although perhaps not as much as when you're using just straight charcoal, okay? So the first thing we want to do, I'm actually going to use this thinner lead for this, or you could use a pencil, is I want to mark out a 5" by 7" square as we did before. So I'm going to make sure this is nice and sharp. Actually, I might just use charcoal for this. Or you could use a pencil if you have a pencil handy. I think I'll use the nitrum charcoal just to mark out the square. So the beginning stages are pretty much the same. So if I take, I don't know, actually let me just, oh, you will have seen hopefully that I've got a printed version as before. I'll remove the reference just for a second so you can see I've got a printed version there, kind of next to my, I'm going to move that down a little bit, I think. Oop, a bit too far. Sometimes it's very tricky getting the cameras in the right position, especially when they're kind of zoomed in like this. I'm going to put in a horizontal. Measure up 2.5 inches. Keep it fairly close to the left-hand side, so it's close to the drawing. The closer your drawing is to the reference that you're using, the easier it is to do the sight size flick. So kind of flicking your eyes quickly from one to the other, which is really useful in sight size to kind of help get an idea of how accurately your drawing is going. I must say, there's been some really pretty amazing studies in the group, and some great practice stuff in there as well. Lines and values, the values especially, will very much help. In some ways, I think this method is, we'll see how you find it, but I think this method in some ways is actually easier than working just with charcoal on its own. Because you kind of have more control over the way that it comes out. So I'm drawing out the top and the bottom, and hopefully if I've managed to get my measurements right today, this will be about Be about 5 centimeters between these lines. Pretty good. And then I want to measure I'm going to measure in from the left-hand side where the tape is. I'm going to come in like 1 inch so that I can get a vertical. You can also use plumb lines for this and you get exact verticals that way. And then I want 7 inches across here. So it's the same size as before. The rectangle is 5 by 7. Also going to put a mark for the central vertical. It's like a very simplified grid. It's worth getting this as close as you can in terms of the accuracy of the measuring. I don't think mine are ever quite perfect, but I try to get them close. Oh, that's 8 inches. How have I managed that? Oh no, it isn't. It's 7, yeah. 5 by 7. It doesn't all fit on. Maybe I'll swing this camera over a little bit so the whole thing is on there. I hate moving the cameras after I've set them up because I can never get them in quite the same position again. But we'll get it as close as we can. Hello Maya, good to see you. I want it to go up a little bit so it's... And of course there's a bit of perspective on the drawing board. As I was explaining before, you'll see that the lines are slightly slanted. Oh, come on. Because I have to have the camera to one side, otherwise I would actually get in front of it. While I was drawing, which would be most frustrating for you to have to watch. So the next job is to draw out the outline. Now I'm going to use, the only thing I wouldn't use for this is pencil because it's graphite. Use some version of charcoal, so I'm going to use the Nitrum Fusain Charcoaler B and sharpen that down. If you use pencil, the problem is it's almost like it resists the charcoal that you put over it. So what tends to happen is that you will still see the pencil line at the end. So mixing pencil and charcoal in the same drawing isn't a particularly good idea, I don't think. Get it nice and sharp. Incidentally, I tend to use either a cloth or I use kitchen roll in order to keep as much as I can my fingers clean of charcoal and also the charcoal itself fairly clean. It helps to reduce the dust a little bit. So first I want to decide on the top point. So where does it cut the vertical at the top? Just about there, just a tiny bit more than halfway. Bottom point, where does the lemon cut the vertical at the bottom? Substantially less than halfway, we'll put it about there. And then you know what's coming furthest left next. Again, is a little less than halfway. And furthest right. So I'm marking where, I want to mark where, the point where it actually, the outline of the lemon cuts the horizontal. That's the measurement I'm looking for. Not particularly the back end of the lemon, and it cuts it about there, I would say. Okay. Hi Mariana, good to see you. 4,800-mile road trip, no. Very happy to see you back. Are you drawing today, Mariana, with us, or are you going to just watch and draw later? I imagine you'd be a little bit tired after all of that travelling. So next I'm going to put a mark in for the width of the knob. So how far back the knob is. I'm going to have to go a little bit over to the side so I can see that better. It's about there. And then we can start putting in angles. So the top is just to the right of the highest point, is pretty much horizontal. But then as soon as we get over here, it starts to go downwards. If I measure up or try to eyeball up how high up the point is where the nub at the end of the lemon meets the curve coming around the form here, then I know I need to go from here to here. And I'm going to do that just with a kind of a straight line block and just judging the angles where I think they should be. So this obviously at this point is the same process as we've already done. A bit more sharpening. It's good practice really to get into sharpening. Every time you do like 2 or 3 lines really, you want to give the charcoal just a quick whiz over on the sandpaper to make sure it's nice and sharp. Hi Nesta, good to see you. Yes, Betty, you should see me doing this. If you can't, try refreshing the page. As far as I know, the video is live. So try refreshing the page if you can't see me actually drawing. Your video might not be playing. Yeah, mine's a bit hurt, Mariana didn't come and visit. Oh dear. So I'm looking at this back angle here now, and I want to get the general angle in of where it crosses the line. And then I can decide how far up. So I'm looking at the distance between the point where it changes angle here and the bottom here of the horizontal here. I'm trying to judge this distance. The angle of the back of the lemon. I'm going to do it just in one line because we're simplifying. Remember, this is just our straight line blocking at this point. So now we need to go from up here to down here. It does go in a little bit, just a little before it comes up again and then goes round. So I want that feeling in. So, I mean, how many lines you decide to use to get around a curve is, I think it's probably personal preference. How many you feel that you need to use in order to draw the curve correctly. But if you're drawing this shape right, this curve here should be quite a lot steeper than this one here, which is more gentle. here's the bottom. And this is a very gradual curve round up to this line here. Not enough Southern charm. Maybe didn't have the whiskey in. Careful with that whiskey though, Susan will be round. So around this side where this part of the lemon comes round to the nub, it's kind of, you know, I'm very fond of looking at lines, drawing out like this. Is a line has to start somewhere and it has to end somewhere. So it's starting here and I've got nowhere for it to end unless I visually mark in where the angle change is, where the nub. I'm going to knock the reference off for a minute actually, because it's going to make it easier for me to explain some things. I'm going to have to zoom out just a little bit so you can see all of the lemon. Apologies, I should have thought of that ahead of time. Some things are maybe slightly different for when I'm demonstrating drawing. Hello, Susan. Well, that's probably good for Jelly to be asleep. So at this point here, I'm looking for where the nub comes back and you get this angle change here. I want that point. So I'll be looking at how far in it is from this point here and this distance. So it's just a little bit in from there and it's about that distance. So I find it really helps to kind of to imagine like straight construction lines between. So I'm imagining this distance here and this distance here. And then that gives me this point, and I can see then the angle that I need to find coming down from that point. The main thrust of today is the values and the method. So I'm not actually going to be checking my accuracy. Maybe we'll check it at the end just to see. But as long as I'm pretty close, I'm happy, you know, for today. And then once you've got this much in, the nub is fairly easy. You can do it basically in 4 lines. Just try to make sure the angles are right. And if these dots were in the right position, it will work pretty well. How are you finding this method of laying out? Is there anything that you feel that I'm not explaining well enough about the block-in stage? Just getting everything kind of in the right place. Do let me know if there's anything. I think this has gone a little bit too wide, so I'm going to bring that in a little bit. And use my putty rubber to take out that line. So this is the point at which I'm kind of standing back and having a look. And a lot of it is kind of I really do think is by feel. I can check a couple of things quickly. So let's check, say I'm going to check this distance from here to the front of the lemon, just with my charcoal stick. I'm not going to make any corrections at this point if I'm out, but just to see how close I've come. Oh, that's actually bang on. Got something right today. And I'll check the height from this point to this point. My height is, I'm slightly too high. So I've gone, well, I'm too high or I'm too low. Let's check and see which. So if I measure up from the middle, I've gone, a little bit of both, a little bit too high and a little bit too low. Close, but out by about 1 millimeter or 2 probably. So my shape is, my lemon is slightly fatter than the original lemon. Are you drawing, Susan, with us or watching today? Actually, do let me know. Anybody who's drawing with me, let me know in the chat. And also, I'd be interested to know if the drawing is clear enough, if you can see clearly enough what I'm doing here. Because it looks to me like I'm, oh great, Kathy. Looks to me like I'm sending it out in good quality, but it's not always easy to tell. Great, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Mary. Oh, Maya, catching up. You must be catching up. Great, thanks, Becky. Thanks, Nesta. Okay, Pat. If it goes a little bit too fast, don't worry about it. Just do the best you can, and don't forget that there's going to be plenty of opportunities over the next couple of weeks before the next session to have more goers at this. It's going to be, I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a new technique for all of you, what I'm going to show you today. So don't worry too much if it doesn't come straight away. Yes, I have read them, Susan, but they weren't at all nuts, so don't worry. The only reason I haven't replied yet is because, frankly, I haven't had much of a moment. It takes me a while to sit down and answer emails. It's not my strong point anyway. Usually I'm doing something, and as you probably know, I'm doing quite a lot of things at the same time at the moment. So, but I did read them. I do read all the emails I get. I don't always get around to replying to them as often as I'd like. Okay, so being as we're doing a fuller drawing this time, I'm also going to mark in roughly where the cast shadow is going to be. Now, obviously, the edge is very difficult to decide on because it's very soft, but you can get a rough idea. So I'm looking at how far down this part of the back of the lemon I need to go before this part of the cast shadow starts to appear out, and I would put it about there. And then it comes away from the bottom of the lemon here and curves out a little bit. I'm going to do this very roughly because basically by the time I've got back to here, I can't really see an edge too much. So this is going to be interesting for us to handle the edges of. I'll take it off the edge of the drawing there. And I also want to mark in, as we did in the last session, the main modeling factors. So first I'm going to go in and put in, that's a little bit too far over. I always start with the bedbug line, with the core shadow. We'll continue to call that the core shadow area as much as we can as we work through this and the other things that we'll be doing. So core shadow is first, and that basically gives your division between light and shadow. So I'm trying to get an idea, a simplified idea of where the terminator is, and this area is all core shadow. But midnight for you is early morning for me, Susan, so I read them this morning. I get up really early in the morning. It's why I'm always so tired when I get to the end of these sessions. Probably I should sleep in. But early morning is my kind of bit of time when everybody else is asleep, the kids, and Michelle is still asleep. And I get a little bit of time to sit and think. And I kind of feel like, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm very definitely an introvert. And I find if I don't get a bit of time now and again, well, basically every day, just to sit and be quiet and think, and I write usually, I go a bit loopy. I start to lose it a little bit. I don't think it's at all required to be an introvert to be an artist, but I think quite a few of us are. There seems to be more of us. Oh, right, I see. You're too quick for me, Susan, today. Okay, so there's our core shadow. Now, the halftone area is going to be, there is no clear halftone, so you really just have to guess this. You know, I'll demonstrate where I will put mine, but obviously this is all going to be graded value, so you can't really say for sure where it is. I would put it at about that kind of shape. And this area here is the reflected light in the shadow. But this and this, the halftone and the reflected light, are pretty much the same value. Okay. So if you want to, you can put in this division at the back. I usually leave these things out, but it's up to you whether you want to put it in or not. You know, where the ground comes up and meets the back, because there is actually a value change, okay? So what I want you to do now, once you've got this drawn in, and you're reasonably happy with it. Oh, running is good, Kathy, yeah. Mary, you're an introvert too, yeah. I think it's true for a lot of us. I mean, I kind of get my quiet time as well if I'm painting. But sometimes, especially at the moment when the kids are off school, that can be, I mean, they're around all the time and they're crazy and young and brilliant and fun and everything. So they're also extremely distracting. Okay. So once you've got that drawn out, what I want you to do is we're going to draw out 3 small squares, and we're going to attempt to match Munsell values with them. 5, a value 3, and a value 7. Okay, so this is a little bit like, you know, if you've been on any of the painting workshops, how I approach those. I'm going to shift this over a little bit now so you can see the whole of the drawing surface. Now where you put them on your drawing is up to you. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to put mine down this side here, down the right hand side, so they're a little bit out of the way. But try and make them the same size. So I'm going to make mine 1/2 inch each, not too big. I mean, you can make them 1 inch wide or something like that if you like. I'm going to make mine 1/2 inch square. So I'm going to measure 1/2 inch in here, 1/2 inch in on the central horizontal. I'm making them smaller. Usually I guess I would do 1 inch. I'm making them a bit smaller mostly for time. And then I'm going to measure 3 1/2 inches going down there, and then 3 down here. Half an inch is kind of small, but this method can be kind of time consuming. So let's do fairly small ones for now. So pop a quick note in the chat box when you've got to this point and you're happy. The next thing we're going to do, I'm actually going to show you the method and then we're going to start applying it to the lemon. I imagine we'll probably be going for 2 to 3 hours tonight. I doubt if, as I was saying when I sent out the email, I doubt if we'll get all the way through the drawing because they're fairly time consuming to do these drawings, but we'll try to get the main value blocks in, handle some of the gradation, and we ought to be able to, and then finish them, you know, after the session. Susan says, is compressed charcoal the square nitrum sticks with the different coloured labels at the top? No, it isn't. That's not compressed charcoal at all. The compressed charcoal is, I linked to it in the materials list. It's very different. The one that I linked to, where have I put it? I'm terrible for putting things down in the studio and forgetting where I put them. Here it is. Is a stick like this, and it's a lot. It goes darker, and it's like somewhere between charcoal and pastel. It's very different. It has binder in it, so it's much easier, as you can see, hopefully, to put down a very flat value like that. It's much easier to cover. And it should have a similar consistency to your white chalk. So the white chalk obviously isn't actually chalk. They call it chalk, but it has some kind of a binder, the Cretacolor white chalk. So it will have a similar consistency. So between the two, don't worry if you're not using toned paper, by the way. It doesn't actually really matter for this. You can see that you can get a light and a dark. And we can actually mix them, but you won't be able to do it, I don't think, with this Fresane charcoal, the normal charcoal. This is not compressed charcoal. It may work. The value range will be it doesn't quite work the same. You could try it, but it doesn't mix in the same way. So the compressed charcoal is softer. It feels more like a pastel, more like a good quality pastel. Yes, I linked to a UK one because I wasn't, hopefully that you would be able to take that, because I knew what I was looking for then. I was hoping you would be able to take that and find either the same or something similar in the US shop. It's slightly tricky, of course, because I buy all my materials in the UK, so I don't always know what's available in the US. But Cretacolor is well known, it should be available in the US. How to load the white stuff into the pen? Well, basically, it's if you have one of these, a clutch pencil, depends how yours works. So this one, you press in at the back, and then it opens up, and then you pop it in, and release it, and it closes on the end of it, and then it holds it in like that. I've got another one somewhere slightly different. The fatter compressed charcoal won't fit in it. So this one, you unscrew this bit, pop it in, and then screw it together. And that holds it in that way. So it depends, you know, that basically 3.5 millimeter clutch pencils. It depends. There's a huge variety of ones you can get. You don't actually need one. It just makes it a bit easier to hold. It's a bit less messy. That's all. Yeah, you don't, for what we're going to be doing, you don't necessarily have to use toned paper. It's going to make some things clearer for me to demonstrate. Ginny says, could you use a black chalk pastel and white also? Yeah, I think you probably could. I've never tried, but I can't see why it shouldn't work. I imagine they're almost the same thing. I think probably the compressed charcoal and the white chalk are slightly harder. So if you're using pastel, I think it will probably be a bit looser. Like, I can't imagine being able to sharpen a pastel to a hard point, and it keeping the point for very long. But have a go. Depends how hard it is. You could also, there's a chance you could have like this pencil is compressed charcoal, so it's more like this. The only difference between normal charcoal and compressed charcoal is compressed charcoal has a binder in it, which makes it softer. It's like somewhere between a pastel and charcoal. This is, it just says Faber-Castell Pit Pastel. That would do it as well. So when you put it down, it should feel slightly soft. You know, so there's a variety of things you can use. I linked to the best example of it that I could find, which is the Cretacolor ones, which are the ones I generally use, and the compressed charcoal. It just needs to be one of these with a binder, so ordinary charcoal has no binder and won't work very well. Catherine says, I'm using Caran d'Ache pastel pencils. That should be fine. Yeah, they should be fine. As long as they're easy to sharpen and mix, it should work fine. So let me know when you're ready. Pop a quick note in the chat box and I'll show you the mixing technique and how to nail a value with chalk, compressed charcoal and chalk, or pastel pencils, or whatever it is you're using. Basically anything that will mix and will also hopefully hold a point. Thanks, Nesta. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Mary. Okay, Kathy. Oh yeah, everybody's ready. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, for sake of clarity, I'm going to use this narrower one and put it in my clutch pencil. So this is the black, okay? So I'm going to lay down, I'm going to do the middle one, a value 5. So I've got my Munsell, trusty Munsell value scale here. Okay, so I'm aiming for a value 5. So first I'm going to put down the black. I'm not going to put it down really heavy, but I'm just going to fill this square. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but try and get it as smooth as you can. So the level of pressure control that it took to get a smooth value with ordinary charcoal, it is greater than you need with this. So I gave you the most difficult one first. This is actually easier to use. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be really close. So I haven't pressed down, it's not really hard. I've done a kind of a medium pressure, okay? I've just covered the square, but hopefully you can see it's not like if I put a really dark value next to it, that's pressing, that's as hard as it will go. Which is, hopefully you can see, is obviously is quite a bit darker. Okay, so then I'm going to swap this out for the white. Change to pastel, your other pastel pencil or whatever it is that you're using. And I'm going to go over this with the white. And this is when it starts to mix. And at this point, you'll find that you can start to get slightly more even finish. So by the time you've laid this on, again, it's even pressure. I'm not pressing really, really hard. It's fairly even pressure working across the surface. Medium pressure. It's difficult to say exactly what medium pressure is, but you know, don't press hard, basically, but enough to make sure that it goes on. Okay. So at that point, we've got a mixed square. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is check the value. So if I get my Munsell 5 out and put it against that, or you know, but if you've got the Cantore scale, it's nice because you've got the little hole in. I'm quite a lot lighter. I'm gonna move the camera over so you can see this better and zoom it in a bit as well, I think. I'm more bothered that you see clearly what I'm doing here than, you know, I'll bring up the photo reference of the lemon. Okay. So checking that with the Cantore scale, it's lighter than a 5. So where is it? There's a 7. It's a little bit lighter even than sorry, that's a 6, a little bit lighter than a 6. I would say it's about a 6.5, so it needs to be darker. So it's like mixing paint, but we're just doing it actually on the surface. So if I go back to my dark one and then work over this again with a slightly lighter pressure, because I just want to bring it down a couple of Munsell steps, not too far. And there's quite a lot of kind of backwards and forwards with the mixing, but you have a really, really fine level of control over the value that you end up with. A lot will depend on the actual material that you're using. If you're using the same as I am, you should be able to get it pretty even. And I'm going to go over that again very lightly with the white, not that one. Just really lightly, just to kind of unify it a little bit. So you could go down, you go up, you go down, you go up until you're happy that you've got close to a value 5. So this is, I would say it's slightly light mine at the moment. What would you say? It's definitely, that's a value 6. It's definitely darker than that. That's a 6.5. And that's a 5. I would say it's very slightly light, mine, at the moment. So just try a bit at a time like this. And get it as close as you can to a value 5. If you hit a hard part, or if you're sometimes with the compressed charcoal, as with the normal charcoal, you'll hit a harder part. Just kind of scrub it against the surface of the paper until you get rid of it. And then just carefully work across it. So now the pressure that I'm putting on there is really light now. Very, very light pressure. Because I just want to bring this down to a value 5. And I want to make it as even as I can. So very, very, this is like barely a whisper I'm putting on there now, just to bring it down a little bit. I'd say that's probably looking about right for a 5 now. Yeah, it's definitely darker than the 6, darker than the 5.5. It's lighter than the 4.5. Pretty happy that that's a 5. And if you want to, within the value itself, you've got to be very careful of the edges, but if you've got a very fine stump, you can smooth it together a bit with a stump as well. But try not to rely on that too much. For the mixing, try to get it as close as you can just by drawing it with the pressure. So this stump here is actually fairly hard. But if I'm careful and I'm very light and I just kind of whisper it over, I should be able to unify this and get it slightly more even. But you really don't want to press. You need. I was in two minds about getting this out at all, because so much can go wrong when you've got a stump in your hands. It really can. But as long as you're very careful with it and you do it very lightly, it can help with this method to unify the value a little bit. I know you were waiting for the stump to come out. But please don't overdo it and don't rely on it. A stump is just, it's actually, I think the correct word is estompe, isn't it? And it's French. And I'm just seeing if I've got any other examples that I could show you. I don't use them very much, so I don't really have too many lying around. But it's just, it's a rolled up bit of paper, basically. And it gets abused a huge amount in charcoal drawings. People do an awful lot of, frankly, I've got to say it, like really not very good work with stumps. It can ruin a pretty good drawing if you overdo it. So try to be very careful with it. What can happen a lot of the time is it just, the drawing just gets out of control. You just lose control of it. Pastel goes all over, the charcoal goes all over the place. And a kind of an over-stumped drawing is well, they don't look nice. And it's kind of, I think a lot of the time people kind of use it as a way to cover the fact that they haven't really developed much skill with charcoal. So, it's really important that you develop your skill with the charcoal. I'm hopefully not offending anyone by saying all this. It can really take the life out of it as well. Now I've lost my putty rubber. Where did I put it? Here we go. So I'm just going to neaten up the edges a little bit. Okay, so this is handy because now we've got, I mean, you can do this with charcoal too, but it's just easier to manage with dry media like this, okay? So next I want to do underneath that, I'm going to do a value 3. This bottom one here. So I'm going to go in a little bit darker, not full strength, but I know that I want this to be a little bit darker than the one above. So this is a Munsell value 3 I'm going to go for here. Need to sharpen a bit. Don't forget to sharpen or you won't be able to get neat edges. Please do try to push yourself to get a nice neat edge as you go. Okay, so that's not the darkest value I can manage, but it's fairly dark. But one thing you'll find quite quickly, once you start to work with a Munsell scale with charcoal, even with compressed charcoal like this, is that the value range compared to paint is quite limited. So that is, I would say, about a value, what would you guess that to be? It's about a value 2, I would say, between maybe a 1.5 or a 2, and I want a 3, which is here, so I want to lighten it a little bit. So I'll get my white and just gently draw over this. Light pressure, because I just want to bring the value up a little bit. Without mixing in too much white. So it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of feel to get an idea, just like mixing paint, of how much you need to put down. But the nice thing about this is, I mean, to an extent with paint as well, really, you can edit it almost endlessly. You know, once it's down, and you've got a few layers down like this, you can't really rub it out. That's the downside. And obviously, if you can't get your highest value if you've got some black in your mix, and you can't get your lowest value if you've got some white in your mix. But okay, so let's check that. You can get nice steady values. So here's my 3. That's looking pretty good actually. Squint down. It's lighter than this one, which is 2.5. Darker than this one, which is 3.5. So I'm pretty happy that that's about a 3. I'm glad you like it, Pat. It's a really nice technique, I think, this. I got it from, this is a very abbreviated version of it, but I got it from Anthony Y. Tulis. And I was very keen on the work of one of his students that I saw some drawings. Kate Salmons. I'll put her name in the chat because she does the most amazing drawings using this method. I haven't looked at her work for a long time actually, so I don't know if she's still doing them. But this will give you a good idea of the kind of things that you can produce. I'll see if I can find one quickly to link. With time and practice, you can make very, very refined drawings this way. Oh, there's a few you can see on this page. I'll put the link in the chat. She's also a very nice person and was very sharing with the method and the technique, which is, and then I kind of took it away and did my version of it as I usually do. And this is what I ended up with. But that will show you, like with obviously a lot of practice, how refined it can get, this method. So the value above that one, the last of the squares, I'm going to do value 7. Lighter value. So with our Munsell scale, I mean, we're talking about up here in terms of value, very light. So I'm going to go in very light with the black first and then mix in more white. It can get almost like obsessive, this method. It's once you kind of get locked into it, it is extremely meditative, and the fine level of control you can get with constantly layering and mixing and bringing the values up and down is quite incredible. And the edge control as well can be very fine, which of course you do need to. You need to keep your charcoal and your chalk very sharp for that. Yeah, it is Kathy, isn't it? She really is amazing. And as I say, lovely person as well. I think most of the drawings on that page are from quite a few years ago. Sharpen up my white. Anthony Y. Chulis, I'll put his name down. He's a drawing and painting teacher. Works a lot from photos. He's a Trondheim painter. He's very keen on the idea of practice and informs his teaching methods with neuroscience, as I do to an extent, but he does more than me, I think. And you can find his work and also the work of his students. He's an interesting guy. He teamed up with an investor who was learning to draw and came to him to learn, and they set up schools all around the world for basically mostly in underprivileged countries to train artists pretty much for free. And then they also turned the schools into holiday places where people can go and stay and put the art on the wall so people can so the people who do the courses can sell their art as well. Pretty amazing. I'd say there's a pretty strong aesthetic that runs through it, and it's usually quite dark, very highly finished drawings done with a method very like this, from photos, which are then taken into Photoshop and edited, which is basically what Anthony does with a lot of his work. You know, all teachers, whether you want to or not, personally I believe all teachers bring some of their aesthetic bias to what they teach. But it's, you know, amazing. He does amazing work. So I'm going to go in, for this one I want it to be lighter, so I'm going to go in a little bit harder with the white. Not full on harder pressure, but a little bit more. And as I say, this method is how that iron drawing, the old iron on the cloth, was done using this method. It is time consuming, so we're only doing a little one. But it's part of the value of this method is that it makes you slow down, makes you slow right down. And what struck me about it immediately when I started messing with it was the level of control over the value means that you can. It works really, really well with Munsell, with a Munsell value scale. So let's see where I am with this one. So I'm after value 7, which is here, this one. And I'm a little bit light, I would say. That's probably like possibly even an 8. So because it's a little bit light, I mean, you have to, this judging that I'm doing, you know, you have to be constantly judging against the value scale. So I'm going to go over this again with a light pressure with the black. So if you just went into this method without first developing your sensitivity to pressure with the exercises we've done so far, frankly, I think you'd probably struggle with it. I'm going to use the stump to blend this a little bit. But it actually, once you get used to it, for laying down blocks of value, I think it's slightly quicker and you get a slightly more even finish than you do with straight charcoal. I think I've probably gone a bit too dark there, but let's check it. Here's my value 7. Yeah, it's very slightly too dark. It's like a 6.5 now, so I went down a little bit too far. So I'm going to bring it back up again. I mean, really try, you know, spend the time to try and get these as accurate as you can. It does take time to do. Don't forget to sharpen in between. But I'm putting just the barest whisper of the white over now. And you can make the tiniest little changes this way. The value 7 again. Now I think it's bang on. Definitely lighter than a 6.5. Darker than an 8. Darker than a 7.5, just. I think that's really close. Cool, well done, Maya. You hit your value bang on. It does happen, you know, sometimes you'll just nail it. And if you want to, you know, with care, make sure your stump is clean, a stump or whatever you want to call it. Just very light pressure, like I literally, you know, you could knock this out of my hand. It's the same way that we hold a brush. So hopefully you'll be seeing the connections between this and the way that I teach the brush hold. Really, really light, just to unify it. And we've got a 3-step value scale, the same as we mix in the value studies. And of course at the top you've got value white, which doesn't go quite as light as paint does. And at the bottom you got black. Now this will only go down to about a value 1.5. Down to about a value, 1.5 to 2 probably. So there's our value scale. How are we doing for time? Oh, we've gone over an hour. I get a little bit involved in this and I've gone over a little bit. So let's have, we'll have a 10-15 minute break. And then we're going to start putting in the main value areas on the lemon. What I hope to get to is as far as at least having this area, the core shadow in, and the reflected light and the gradation from one to the other, because you can do beautifully fine gradations this way. Susan, I think you'll love this once we just get into the gradation part of it. And then the half tone as well, and into the light, just as blocks, and start to put in a little bit of the value in the background as well. Marilyn says, are you using the rough side of the Meiteong paper? Which side am I using? Think so. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. You can get so obsessive about this. You know, when you see like little areas where there's a little bit of the paper poking through, or it's not quite even, very, very light pressure with the stump, and you can really nail it. It's really a beautiful technique, I think, this, and amazing things can be done if you have the time and the patience and the pressure sensitivity to do it. But the real value of it, I think, what I love about it is when you match it with this, you put it together with a Munsell scale, and it really comes into its own. Okay, so let's have 10-15 minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll start on the lemon. Okay, so hopefully that's worked out all right for you all so far. Do let me know if you feel like you're managing to get fairly even values here. Susan, if you watch this later, I'm very happy to hear that you've found your materials. That's great. Titty, good to see you. Don't worry, of course, because it's being recorded, you'll be able to catch all of it later. So all we've done so far is we've drawn out the lemon, and then we've done 3 Munsell values, a value 3, a value 5, and a value 7, with the layering technique, which you'll probably need to see, but we're about to start working on the lemon itself, so you'll see it happen as we go into the lemon, okay? So I'm going to sharpen up first, and I'm also going to show you, remember, sharpening, sharpening, sharpening. You've always got to keep your charcoal sharp, even for this method as well. We're looking for an awful lot more control than you would normally get in, say, a pastel drawing. I'm going to bring up the reference image again, so we can see it, but I'm also going to, actually I think possibly my camera is slightly out of focus. Let me just check that. I think I might be able to focus it a little better. Just give me 2 seconds. I just got close up to the screen and it's pretty well focused, but I think I might be able to focus it a little better. Let's have a look. Yes, I think that's a little sharper. So I've got another version of this reference image, which I'm going to show you now, which I've been over and I've checked the actual values of the lemon. Okay, so here is the photo of the lemon with a Munsell scale superimposed, and the main values and the smaller transitions. So the reason that some of these numbers are larger is that they are the big value blocks. So you can see the core shadow there is a value 2. The background above it is about a value 4. The reflected light down the bottom of the lemon is about a value 4. The ground below it is about a value 6. And the lightest part at the front of the lemon, not the highlight, but the body of the lemon itself, is about a value 8. Okay, so now we know how to mix and make Munsell values. So we've got a value 3, a value 5, and a value 7 here. We can see the values that we need to put into the drawing. So hopefully, if you're mentally jumping ahead, you can already see what we're going to be doing next, okay? So I'll probably will put a little bit of a suggestion of the background in around if we have the time, but mostly I want to work on the lemon itself and get these values in. So first we've got this area here. Now we want a value 2 there. So that's actually darker. If we look at the value 2, it's darker than this value that we've got here because that's a value 3. So we want it to be a little bit darker than that. This is close, but a little bit darker than that. So the first thing I'm going to do is to fill in the whole of the core shadow shape. It's not the hardest I can possibly press, but it's going in fairly opaquely. You know, it's a reasonable amount of pressure. and I want to pretty much cover this because it will go slightly darker than the 2. So we're going to need to mix in a little bit of white with it as well. Try to cover it fairly evenly if you can. But if you end up with little skips here and there, obviously you will be able to sort those out with the stump as long as you don't overdo it. And I really would try, if you possibly can, to do as much of it as you can without that. And just use it if you find you just want to get just an added kind of a level of smoothness that you can't quite get any other way. Just by drawing. So my main goal for the session today is to show you the method, to show you how we can use it in order to match values of the Munsell value scale very, very closely, show you how to use it and how it's put down, and then you can finish your lemon drawing as much as you would like it. Leave it where it is or really refine it down so it's much more finished. Okay. So that is the main shadow block, put in the core shadow. And if I put my value 2 over it, it's close, but it's very slightly darker. It's actually about a 1.5. So that means probably that the lowest value that we can get with this is just a little bit less than 1.5. So it's quite a bit narrower than paint, because ivory black gets down to about a value 0.5 in Munsell terms. So it's worth remembering that your value range is slightly narrower with charcoal. So next I'm going to get the white. Going to need sharpening again a little bit. Don't forget to sharpen. So the way I do it when I'm sharpening them to keep them clean, I'll just show you my sandpaper quickly. I use 1 bit for the black and 1 bit for the white. So you can sharpen them and still keep them clean. So I'm going to go over this just with the kind of the light whisper of white. I just want to bring it up a little bit, not too much. Very light pressure I'm using here. If you're using the same materials as I am, the ones from the material list, you will want light pressure here. But the beauty of this method is that you can vary it as much as you want to. If you go too far with this, you can just go over it again with the black with a very light pressure, and you'll be able to get very close. It takes a little while to build the drawings up this way, but once you start to get the values established, you can get some pretty amazing results. Very light pressure. And I imagine at the moment this is probably lighter pressure than you're used to using with the brush, but I will sometimes use even lighter pressure than this when I'm painting. So don't forget that we're also, as well as learning about modeling factors and learning this technique and slowing right down and working very slowly on building up the drawing, we're also developing pressure control. And the more you do this, the more you do drawings like this, the more you'll develop your pressure control. So I'm just going over the bits that I don't think are all that even, just to try and even this out a little bit. So this is the same, exactly the same method as we used with the charcoal, just looking for bits that stand out, that aren't completely flat. All the same value. Any dark bits and going over them with the white. Okay, so let's check the value of that. We're after a value 2, remember. So here's my value 2. Slightly light. I've gone to about a 2.5, so I need to bring it back down just a little bit. Let's try just going over it gently with the stump and see if that will bring it back down. It may mix them a little bit. No, not really. I really want to bring in, because it's a very fine difference now, half a Munsell scale, half a Munsell step we're talking about. Very, very light pressure with the black. And don't be tempted to do this if your charcoal isn't sharp, or it's just much more difficult to control if the charcoal is blunt and you're getting wide lines. This is just about the lightest pressure that I can manage, because I want to bring it down half a step in Munsell, a very small amount. Very, very light pressure. Just working over the whole surface, trying to keep it even. You can get really obsessive about this, and if you do, you can get it so that it's completely flawless. I'm not sure I've ever got it to that level, but you could if you took the time, if you took the time to do it. Okay, I'll check that against my value 2. That's looking good now. That, I'd say, if I squint down, I actually can't see the hole anymore. Definitely darker than that, lighter than that. I'm happy with that, about a value 2. That's my shadow block done. So let me know quickly, now we've put the first bit down on the lemon itself, how are you finding this? Is it working all right for you, or do you feel you're struggling? Do you feel you're able to get a nice flat tone, and can you hit those values that you want? How are you finding it to work with? I'm just using the stump to smooth out a couple of areas. What you can also try, if you don't have one of these, or you want to try a different method, like you can also use, this is a very soft brush. You have to be a bit careful. This is a synthetic round, and you can very lightly brush across the surface to unify it. Very light though, and you've got to be very careful at the edges, because you will get hairy edges if you're not careful. Seems to work, says Nesta. That's great. Glad to hear it. And bear in mind that this is, the first time that any of you have used this technique. I'm assuming it's not a technique that's used very often. And I actually, when I started posting drawings that were done this way, a long time ago, when I first learned about this technique and started developing it, I did get quite a lot of people asking me how the drawings were done. How can you do that with charcoal? Well, this is how. I'm just neatening up the edge with the putty rubber. Bit of a struggle, Mary. Okay. What is it that you find more difficult, Mary? Is it getting an even value? Pat says, I love it, but it looks darker than the lemon to me. Yeah, it does. But don't forget that we're judging this value here against everything around here, against a very light value surface. In the photograph, you have a lot of different values around the lemon. So as soon as it's the way we judge value, and it really does throw you. But the way our perception system works is that we judge value in relation to other values. So this looks very, very dark against everything else. But the value I actually want in the background here is a value 4, which is like between these two. So it's pretty dark. So if I had this all filled in a value 4, this would look a little lighter. And if I, just for sake of, just to demonstrate this, I don't recommend you do it at the moment. But once I've got around here and I've filled this in, I'll put a little bit of it in now. Our very lowest value is going to be down here. Which is the thick black, like the lowest value that we can get. If the paper is too lumpy and a lot of it is showing through, just keep working over it. You should still be able to cover it. You basically want it so that you don't actually see any of the paper. You're completely covering the paper with the compressed charcoal and the chalk. Okay, so once that's in, we want the general area around here to be a value 4, and then we'll handle the gradation between them. So we'll do this reflected light down here next. Okay. Oh, what paper are you using, Mary? Is it the Meteon paper? It should be all right. But we'll see, I guess. We can have a chat about it and see what the problem might be. So although there's quite a bit of variation in this area, I'm going to fill it in all the value that we want, which is a value 4. This value here, not quite a 5, lighter than a 3, in between these two. So I'm going to start off by putting in, not very hard, but okay. It's hard for me to see without actually seeing the results you're getting. So, I mean, you can always, if you want to, if your phone is handy, you can try and take a quick photo and post it in the chat. I think it is possible to do that, although I've never actually done it myself, so I'm not sure how. So I'm using like fairly, not my darkest pressure here, but fairly dark. Not quite as dark as I used for doing the value in the core shadow. So you can see the texture of the paper coming through underneath. But eventually when I have the white over this and I've adjusted it 2 or 3 times, the paper will be covered. So I'll get this reasonably even and then go over it with the white with a fairly light pressure, and that should start to unify it all. Can you tell me, Mary, what compressed charcoal and chalk you're using? Is it the Cretacolor ones? So hopefully you can see as the white goes on, it pushes the black around underneath, mixes with it, and very little of the paper is visible now. There's a few little skips here and there. So I think probably one of the nicest things about this method, unlike working just with charcoal, is that you can adjust like almost infinitely for the values. You can bring it up and then bring it back down, which is much more difficult to do with charcoal on its own. So let's check. I'm after a value 4 here, so there's the value 4. So if I put that over it, I can see not too bad. Actually, it's very close. Maybe a tiny bit too light. But in the right area, for sure, it's about right. I'm going to go over that with the stump very lightly, just to kind of mix it in. So I'm using the side of the stump like a flat part of it. If you don't have one, you can do this just as well by adding more black and white chalk. I would advise strongly against using your finger though. I'm not going to work into that too much because it's about the right value already. And I'm going to work into it from here. Right, oh, okay. They should be working all right. Those are the same ones I'm working with. But we'll have a chat after you've posted it in the group anyway. So the value 4, I want to be hitting somewhere around here. So the whole of this is now about a value 4, okay? Well, I say about it. Actually, if I squint down, that looks perfect to me. I can't see the hole anymore in the value scale. So I'm happy with that. But what I want to do is to manage the transition here from the core shadow into this value. So around here, so this is a value 2, this is a value 4. Around here, I want to be hitting about a value 3. So the way that I can do that is to go from, again, I'm using light pressure. So we've got a fairly hard edge dividing the two here. So I'm going to work from the dark gradually into the light. Oh, I need to sharpen first. If you get into doing this with a rough piece of compressed charcoal or chalk that isn't sharpened, then you lose a lot of the control. I think a lot of the time, except for people who've done atelier training, you tend to use charcoal unsharpened. And you can get expressive results that way, but you can't really do this kind of drawing with it. Very careful. An exact drawing with it. So I'm working very light pressure out of the shadow and into the reflected light. So my goal first is to soften the transition and then to bring this darker value a little bit lower and have it gradually lighten until by the time we get around down to here, we're down to our value 4. So I know that all of this wants to be a bit darker than it is at the moment. And the white is really kind of like the unifier, you know, it helps everything sort of mix together. So the pressure is very light, and the more I go over it, the more I bring the value down. Okay. It's fairly nice gradation, but I've got a bit of a suggestion of a band here. So if I get the white and work back up into it from the other side, I can gradually, bit by bit, get an even finer gradation here. Now, like anything else, this does take practice and it does take time. So what I'm after getting is a completely smooth gradation from shadow into reflected light here. Now your eye may be telling you, Pat was making the point earlier that it looks a lot darker than the actual lemon. Your eye will probably be telling you that these values are wrong. And that's why we are using the Munsell scale to make sure that we get them right. So don't be tempted, for instance, to make this lighter because you can see a lighter bit here at the bottom of the lemon on the photo. Don't be tempted to change it. Make sure that that's still around a value 4, 3, 2. And don't be afraid to get the value scale out to check it. So down the bottom here, we want 4. Around this area, somewhere in between, we want around value 3. And here in the core shadow, we want to still be a value 2. So keep checking those values and make sure you don't wander away from them. And then get the gradation as smooth as you can. And if you thought drawing with charcoal can be obsessive, this can get really, really obsessive. Personally, I find in quite a meditative way, though. And in fact, like teaching this course again has reminded me how much I miss just drawing. For a long time, a few years ago, I stopped painting altogether and just drew, and then I did just value studies in paint before I came back to colour. And thankfully, by the time I came back to colour, I'd discovered Munsell. So I did a lot of value work in Munsell first and then came back to colour. And this strong grounding that you get in value through working very carefully like this goes through everything you do. So hopefully you can begin to see like how careful the control can be. You can bring the value up, take it back down by like a hair's whisper with just the lightest possible pressure. And I'd really want to encourage you to get into just experimenting with how light a pressure you can use and still make a difference. Really try to feel at a really fine-grained level how gentle you can be with the materials and still make something of a mark, still affect the value that you're seeing. The other thing that's nice about the compressed charcoal is unlike ordinary charcoal, it stays where you put it. I mean, you'll want to, if you want to keep the drawings for any length of time, you'll want to fix them, spray them with something fixative or put them behind glass. But it's a lot more stable than ordinary charcoal is. I'm just trying to get this gradation as fine and even as I can. I'm getting a bit of a band here. So a lot of standing back and squinting will help you. And swapping, you know, from the black back to the white. It takes a long time and a lot of delicacy to get a gradation like this smooth. I mean, I'm going like full on to getting this like as smooth as I can to show you how careful you can be about working into it like this to try and get that very smooth. And the more you build up, the more you cover the paper, and the easier it becomes to work. Okay, so I think I've got a pretty smooth gradation there. And I'm going to put in, now that that's in, I'm going to put in this value here, which we basically want a value 1. I don't think we can get quite that low, but we'll just go as low as we can in the the cast shadow here underneath. But a word of warning, don't try to handle this edge just with the compressed charcoal going out to the paper, because by the time this drawing is finished, there won't be any paper showing. So we won't handle that edge until this value is done. But I'm going to go around the bottom here and put the cast shadow in. Just the very darkest part of it. So I can get an idea of the relationship back here. And now also, I'm always talking about this on painting workshops, you've got the opportunity to soften this edge between the reflected light and the cast shadow. So I'm going to sharpen up my black a little bit. Don't forget to sharpen. And bring the cast shadow up, light pressure into the half tone. I've got a sharp point on the charcoal now. These bits especially you want to be doing with a sharp point on the charcoal. And just soften that transition there, get a nice soft edge. It's the other thing you can do very, very carefully with this method is get very, very nice soft edges. Get the white again. And work back out. Really soft, very light pressure now. Trying to get a very even gradation from the reflected light, which is value 4, to the cast shadow, which is the lowest we can get. Do they? Oh, I would say probably the soft. Are you sure, do they? Maybe they do. Probably, I mean, if they do, it's probably best to get both, but I would think most likely the soft one. I thought they only came in one. Oh, wait. And there's a little hint of, at the bottom of the reflected light where it comes down here towards the ground, it's a little bit lighter there, so I'm just going to lighten it just a little bit with the white, just around the bottom here. Oh, that's interesting. Are you talking about, Titty says, I got soft and medium and they sell hard ones too. I don't think you want the hard ones for sure. Is that the compressed charcoal, the black? I'm pretty sure the white for sure only comes in one hardness. I thought the black did too. But it's a while since I bought any. And my box broke long ago, so mine are like loose in my art bin. So I'm not sure what these are in that case. But I usually default to soft because it gives you the widest value range. I've got a little, just where I went over the edge here, I've got a slight dark. I don't know if the camera is bringing it out. There's a slight dark bit there, so I'm just going to go over it a little bit with the white just to lighten it, even it out a little bit there. And is that the compressed charcoal that comes in medium and soft? I would say in that case it's probably best to get both and see, but I would, as I say, I would use generally the soft. So there's a couple of little bits in the reflected light here that I can see. I don't know if hopefully the camera can pick them up. Like there's a slightly light patch just here. So I'm just going to go over that just a little, just a whisker with the black and try and bring it back down. This is the lightest pressure basically that I can manage. And there's a slightly light patch here as well. Just trying to make it really as even as I possibly can. Right, okay. I'll check that out then. So now we want to do the halftone, which is this kind of strip here. So we start on a 2. The halftone goes up to about a 4, about the same value that we've got here. And then it very quickly goes 5, 6 and out to the light. So let's see if we can manage that transition. So first I'm going to do all of this with a 4. Actually, let me check the time. Oh, it's 8:15. It's probably as well, now that we have a bit of a break. I'm afraid I'm getting into obsessive drawing mode and would probably go for quite a long time without a break at this point. But that's what we're going to do next. We're going to do the same value that we did here all the way around here and then manage a transition from 5 to value 6 out there. So let's have a break from here, for 10-15 minutes and have a cup of tea, and then we'll go on with the half tone. Okay, got myself a cup of tea. Definitely needed. And I'm gonna go up to probably about another half an hour-ish. And I want to show you, I'm not going to go the whole way around, but I want to show you how I'm going to come out from the core shadow here out through the halftone and into the light. So the values need to raise, the gradation needs to be quite quick here, much faster than this one, which is a very slow gradation, from a value 2 into a 4 of the halftone, and then a 5 and a 6 until we come out to a 7. Okay, so I'm probably going to do maybe just about this much of the top of the lemon. Sorry, sorry, Maya. And just manage that gradation. That's probably as far as we're going to get today in this session. It is a fairly time-consuming process, but that is also part of the point. So this is like, I would say, a medium pressure. I'm going to go down to about here. And make this band a value 4. Do you want out, little man? What is it then? Oh, just want the pat. We do want out. Okay. There we go. Over it with the white, at which point it starts to mix. So similarly to when we're painting, and also when we did the charcoal version, we want to keep the terminator, we want to soften the terminator, but have it still be able to tell that it's there. We'll get this to about the right value first. That's a little light at the moment, so I'm going to go over it again with black. Lighter pressure now. And in the same way as we've done the other parts and the blocks here, trust the values and just keep going until you get the value about right and you've got a fairly even, as even a covering as you can manage. Always check the values, don't forget to check. So 1 to 4, that's looking pretty good there. So where we come into the shadow here, I want to soften this edge. So I'm going to start on the dark side of it with a light pressure and just bring it into the halftone a little way. Now, yes, you could be tempted to do this with a stump or something like that, but I would encourage you to try and do as much as you can with the charcoal, because it will develop your sensitivity to pressure and also your focus as well. Sometimes the easiest way to do something is not the way you learn the most. I'm going to bring the exposure of the camera up because it is a bit on the dark side, I think. I'm getting more of those values in. It's difficult to visually match the exposure until some of the values have gone in. But this isn't a complete, just a band of value 4. So over on this side here, I'm going to bring in a little bit more white on the left side as we move out of the value 4 and in towards a 5. And then the 5 comes out to, I mean, obviously these are slightly artificial divisions, but I want the 5 to come out to about there and the 6 to come out to about there, say. So let's say roughly we would want the 5 to be something like this and the 6 to be something like this. So these are like, this is the halftone moving out into the light. So sometimes people do break modeling factors down more, and they would say that this is the dark light, this is the light halftone. You know, what we're really doing is a gradation, but breaking it down into strips helps you to manage the transitions. So I'm going to go over this again with black. Little bit lighter this time. So you can't see what you're going to end up with until you've got a little bit of it done, you know. And then go over that with white. So when you put the first layer down, it looks rough, you know, there's still quite a lot of the paper showing through. It's not until you build up the layers that you get to see the technique working. I'm going a little bit quicker now because I want to be able to show you the transition, so the finish won't be quite as careful on this bit. Going a little bit lighter, so let's check that I've got that roughly to a value 5. Probably a little bit light already. It's like a 5.5. But I'm going to be affecting it anyway, so don't mind too much. And I want to go out to about a 6 here. So here I'm going to use lighter pressure with the black. So I'm trying to cover it evenly if I can, but because I'm using a lighter pressure, obviously more of the paper is going to show through. So if you did, you know, I mean, the people who did a lot of practice with the lemon and just charcoal, you know, I mean, this should not present really any problems for you because you will have developed the sensitivity, assuming you're not having any problems with the materials, of course. And then go over that with white, which will unify it. And this is hopefully going to be at about a value 6. And doing them in bands like this just helps you. We're going to obliterate the bands, obviously, once we get to it, but it helps you to check your values because it's very hard to check values on a gradation. So let's see if I'm up to about a 6 there. Here's my value 6. Looks pretty good, maybe very slightly light, about a 6.5. Little fella is demanding it again. Come on then. What? No, do you want to go out? No, I can't come with you. I'm sorry. You coming in? Come on then. Your son now. Come on then. You want to play or something, don't you? No. But I'm drawing, dude. I can't at the moment. Okay, so I want to work. So I've got basically three bands here. So this one wants to get slightly lighter as it goes into this one. This one gets lighter as it goes into this one. And conversely, this one gets darker. So I'm going to gradually work with the white over the edge of these into the darker one. So this is into the 5. And then similarly here, very, very light pressure here because I don't want to bring the value up too much too quickly. And then a little bit of black going into the left-hand side of each band just to bring it down. So it's looking a bit patchy at the moment, so very light pressure with the white. So it's similar to the drawing, similar to the way we do the value studies. We start with the anchor values and then refine them down. A little bit dark across the top there. So now I'm looking for areas that are standing out to me as being uneven. Check the values again. So I want to be at about a 6 over on the left hand side. Going a little bit too light. I've already hit the 7. Probably getting close to where the 7 wants to be anyway. So halftone here should be about a 4. Coming out to a 5. And a 6. Yeah, it's not looking too bad. But the time-consuming bit is refining it down. Without losing, and I suppose the tricky bit as well, without losing the gradation, without losing the change in the values. So what I do mostly is I stand back, squint a little bit, look for any bit that stands out as looking uneven and take it out, usually with the white, but sometimes with the black. And gradually it builds up. The charcoal on the surface. So I've got like a light patch here. I'm going to go over that very lightly with the black. And that's literally like barely touching. Just by the time you get to this stage, you've got most of the values on. I'm just really just whispering it on. So I want to still be able to see where I change from the shadow into the halftone. I want to see the terminator, but I want it to be soft. I want that edge to be soft. So what happens a lot, what I see a lot is people make this gradation, they bring the gradation of the core shadow into the halftone too far over. So it becomes a long soft gradation like that, and you lose the effect of it turning into shadow then. So this being very flat gives us the impression of shadow, the core shadow there. I'm going to keep working on this a little bit. It's got a little bit of texture on it, but not too much. And it's actually, in a sense, it reflects the kind of the slight lumpiness of the lemon. Just trying to even out any spots that are standing out to me. I've got a suggestion of a band here, so I'm going to work back with the white over that, very, very light. To try and take that band out. And getting a gradation like this very smooth, it does take time. There's no easy fix for that. If you want it to work well, it's constant standing back and checking, looking for areas that stand out as being not smooth. And although there's little gashes and stuff like that on the lemon, I would encourage you to avoid them, at least at the beginning, and try and get a smooth gradation, because you can always, if you want to, add them afterwards. You can draw into this, which is another advantage of using a technique like this. So I'm going to go up all the way into the 7 here. So I'm going to use very light pressure with the black, kind of hatching it in. And then go over that with the white. With enough pressure for it to mix with that black. And I want this to be lighter here. I want to be up to a value 7 here. So hopefully we should be around a value 7 towards an 8 by the time we get out to this point. So here's my value 7. Looks like I'm around a 7, so there's an 8. Bit darker, so I'm not quite out to the 8 yet. So the speed of the gradation, by which I mean how sharply it happens, has a huge effect on how you perceive the form. Okay, this is really a really important point to grasp. Like this gradation here, as the light goes down towards the halftone, is very gentle, and then it falls off very sharply here into the halftone. And that always happens on curve into the halftone and then into the core shadow. And that always happens on forms like this. The gradation of here, this area is really still shadow. This is reflected light coming down, bouncing off the ground into the shadow. So this is a very gradual gradation. This is all still shadow. It's just a bit of reflected light here, very gradual. This is a sharp drop off here and then a very gentle gradation. And that's what's beginning to create this feeling of form. Even without it being finished, you can begin to feel the way the form is going around, and then finally here it drops off into shadow. But that gradation is very carefully handled. You know, it's a very smooth gradation across the light. Slow, fast, very fast. Like that. So I'm coming around out to an 8, which is the lightest value of the light part of the lemon, except for the highlight, which obviously is going to be white. So this basically, what I'm doing here, this gradation, goes all the way around the lemon. And you can make it as careful and as refined as you like. This is going a bit too light, so I want to be up to about a value 8 here. So this is the value of the light. This is like the lightest part of the light. So I've slipped a bit and got a dark value there. Bring in a little more light. So long since I've drawn this way. I love this technique. It is time consuming, but that is part of what I like about it. And just the fineness of the control. Let's see what value I've got in my light. I want to be going, by the time I'm here, I want to be going up to about a value 8, which I am pretty much bang on there. Okay. Now there's one more bit that you would need to be careful of in this drawing. If you're using white paper, you could just leave a gap. But if you've got slightly toned paper like this, I'm just trying to take out a slight imperfection there where it's a bit too white. You've got the highlight parts. Now, if you go over it, if you bring this all the way across without putting the highlights in, unlike paint, it's difficult to do that afterwards, okay? because if you have any black on the surface, you won't get your full white. So what I would be inclined to do is, before I get there, is to put my little highlights in. You know, there's a little kind of, you could actually do them really exactly, but they're basically just little specks like this. So I would put a little pattern of those in and then work up to it. And there's one here too. And then gradually bring this value round until I got there. I'm going to work across the form a little bit, because can you see how I'm getting kind of a little bit of a suggestion of lines? But you can get such a smooth gradation. The pressure that I'm using now on the white is I'm barely touching the paper. I'm using this more than anything else just to kind of even out the values. I'm using it almost like the stump. You can actually do a drawing like this without any stump at all. So you can see, hopefully, from watching this much, that one, you have a lot of control, two, it takes a long time. So that iron drawing that I showed at the beginning of the course took 6 weeks. Obviously, I wasn't working on it every day, but there was a lot of work in that drawing, you know. The values were all worked out with Monsolin the same way as this is, but they were worked out from life, not from a photo. So that the whole drawing was done from life, but it's not actually all that different, really. There's something about drawing this way that makes it feel like you could almost reach out and touch it. Just this bit of form here. A little bit light here, I think. Bring a whisper of black, and then I'll unify it again with the white. You can bring it down, up. Just keep swapping from one to the other. And the lemon is kind of an easy subject to work like this, because it doesn't have hard edges and you know, any straight edges and a lot of detail. But just by keeping your charcoal sharp, you can do a lot more careful stuff. So the background value actually here would be around a 4. So if I put a little bit of that in, just so you can see how that value there works, that gradation there works. So somewhere around this point where we're in the half tone, the value 4 in the background will be the same as the value of the half tone, and we'll basically have a lost edge. So I'm going to do this in the same way, put the black down first. So I know what value I'm after. It's like something around here, around that point there. Go over it with the white. Oh, I need to sharpen it. So hopefully I'll try and complete this drawing over the next few days. I'll post it in the group tomorrow, as it is now, and we'll hopefully find time to work on it. The way I like to work on drawings like this is just to keep them there. You know, if you have a spare easel, thankfully I've got 2 easels, so I can use one for painting. Well, I've got a bunch actually, but I only have 2 in the studio. One for painting and one for drawing. Or one for doing paintings and one for doing practice. So this I'll be able to keep up kind of indefinitely and just, you know, do a half an hour on it here and there. So I'm after a value 4 here, so let's see what I've got so far. not too bad. A little bit too light, I think, so I'm going to go in with a little bit more black. So all the time you're building up, if you do it too thin and you don't have enough charcoal on the surface, it's a little bit like paint in a way, that there's not enough to work. You need to have enough on there to work, you know, work the edges and to fill in the texture of the paper, at least a little. Back up again a bit, that went too dark. So it should be just about here that I end up with a lost edge, so I can go across that there. And then back here it will show us slightly lighter than the core shadow. Okay, so now you can see like how that gradation there is working against what would be the background value there if we filled it in. And hopefully, Pat, you can now see that this is the right value for the background, it's value 4. So this core shadow here does need to be dark against that. It does need to be darker than this value here. I can also neaten up this edge a little bit when my drawing is a little bit dodgy. And if you want to, once you have the whole thing kind of filled in with the right values and the gradations carefully handled, you can go to an insane level of detail. You have so much control. And using Munsell for the values really kind of nails this method and lets us get really, really accurate values. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one there for now. As tempted as I am to carry on fiddling with it. You can see hopefully here the quality of by which I mean the textural quality, the surface quality of the drawing is beginning to have that look of those ones that I showed you, especially the drawing of the iron. See, if you use enough pressure, go over it enough times, you can get completely flat velvet. It's not black, but it's the lowest value that you can get. It's like kind of a grey. So, apart from the pressure and getting a handle on the basic technique, one of the main things that I want you to get here about the way the form is handled is a very gentle gradation here. Because this is just reflected like going up into the shadow. This is all shadow. And here we have a very, very gentle gradation which suddenly goes very quickly into the halftone and into the shadow. And that's what gives it this feeling of round form. Okay, if this gradation is too smooth and this value goes too dark out this way, it won't look right. It won't look like the form won't turn properly to fit the drawing. It will look slightly out. Virginia says, I'm not sure I understand what your plan is with the highlight area and the toned paper and the drawing you've done. If you ignore the toned paper for a minute, the only problem with this method is, if I did all of this, a value 8, the whole thing, and then went in to do my highlights, it would be difficult to get the highest value because whatever I put down will mix with a little bit of my black. So I put those in first as a mental note to make sure that I don't go over them with black. Because the only way to get the highest value you can possibly get with this method, which is the white on its own, is literally to use the white on its own. It's not like paint in that I could go down and I could go in here and put a completely white highlight, because it will inevitably mix a little bit with the black. So I put those in first, the highlights, to remind myself not to go over them. You know, that's the highest value that I'm going to have in the whole drawing, is here, is these little highlight areas. So I need to make sure that I don't go over them. with a grey. Otherwise they'll never go white. Hopefully that makes sense. Mary says, one of my problems was timidness in laying down the first level of black. Yeah. So your homework challenge for the next week, should you choose to accept it. Yeah, draw around it, Junior, that's right. Just so it doesn't mix. Your homework challenge is to do a scale like this, a 3-step scale, value 5, value 7, and value 3. I'll write them on there. 5, 7, and 3. And then put black at one end and white at the other. And I want you to try to do a fine gradation between these values so you eventually end up with a strip. So do a square here, which is black, and a square here, which is white, until you eventually end up with a strip which goes from black to white and as smooth a gradation as you can possibly manage. Don't be afraid to put down plenty of the charcoal because you have to have enough on there for it to mix. You know, there needs to be quite a bit on there or you can't get the mixing method. Okay, I've been itching to show you this. I love this method. It does take a bit of practice. It does take a little while to get familiar with it. But if you can do this exercise a few times of the gradation from light to dark and take some time over it, stuff like this will come really easily, you know, and you'll be able to nail the values. Okay. So thanks very much. Do post your stuff in the group and I'll have a look at it. I'm going to put this one in. I will try very hard to remember to do it tomorrow. I actually must admit I have a terrible record for remembering it because usually the next day I'm starting on something else. But I mean, you know, for me, I'm pleased that even though this drawing isn't complete, I can already feel the form turning here into shadow. It already has a feeling of it there. Titty says, can I put fixative on the drawing and continue it later? I wouldn't personally, never know. Fixative is like a kind of a varnish and I just wouldn't want that on my drawing. I really, really wouldn't. I wouldn't put fixative on it until right at the end. What happens if you put fixative on it is it makes a hard surface and it won't take charcoal properly again. So you can't fix it until you're sure you've finished. At least that's what I've always found. So now I'm starting to see little, this is where I get into twiddly stage. I'm starting to see little things that I want to change. But I am going to stop and I'm going to go and have my dinner. Thanks very much, everybody, and I will see you all again soon. Next week is going to be another critique session. So if you manage to get one of these lemons completed, or more than one if you can manage it, by next Tuesday it will be, that would be great, and then we can go through them in the critique session. Brilliant, that's great to hear, Becky. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. Challenging but exciting. Brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye for now, and I'll see you soon.